all of this, like, how did you get into this, and maybe why, or who, maybe some of who your inspirations were, bro? Like,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
younger, coming into it all.
Yeah, I've gotten used to telling the story a bit. It's kind of the first thing I ask people as well when I meet other dancers and everything, like, what's your dance story? So I've got my speech kind of ready to go. I grew up, my initial introduction to dancing was watching like old Hollywood films with my brother. So Julian and I, you know Julian as well, right? So he's in Hamilton now, and we used to
Mm-hmm.
watch like lots of old Hollywood films when we were kids. So mainly like Gene Kelly and Bob Fosse or any of these kinds of Fred Astaire, etc. So we were kind of always performing when we were young, and both of our parents are artists. So we were kind of surrounded by paintings, and we had a lot of interesting objects, and we were encouraged to do what we wanted. We were excited about performing for the family. So it started like that. We went to Brent Street, the older generation. So we I started at Brent Street when I was 7. I was there until I was 14. Usually I have to explain that to people in France. I have to say, yeah, it's a performing arts school, a bit in American style. That's how I describe it to people, because in France, everyone studies classic. Basically, everybody's doing ballet. If you want to be a dancer, you can't be taken seriously, or your dreams are not taken seriously unless you're going to be a classical dancer in France. Um, and so I have to often explain, like, oh yeah, yeah. So we actually had a much more fun way of growing up in dance in Australia. Like I remember like running across the floor. Every Saturday was like a social experience because it was Brent Street, so everyone would dress up fun, and there'd be a whole energy playing the 80s jazz sounds and running down the floor. So it was all this that kind of got me initially excited about dancing. Before that, I always wanted to do something in the arts, drawing or playing music or theater. But out of all those, dance was the most fun. And I think Australia is very interesting for that, because we have this dance school culture where we all get to just learn many styles, and everyone can be hungry for it. So I grew up like that, the same way that like a lot of Australian dancers grow up, in that special context of Brent Street, which was this hyper competitive uh, environment. But I stopped when I was 14, I think, at Brent Street, 13 or 14. And I discovered like street styles. Like I watched You Got Served for the first time. And then like, I used to say like, the classical violinist might discover the guitar and want to like play rock and roll. So I wanted to do hip hop at that stage. So I changed all my style. I like started buying caps and baggy t-shirts. And I remember I saw Jordan Hill perform, and he would have been like 12. And I was still at Brent Street, and I'd never seen anyone. I've seen like maybe bits of hip hop on TV, but I'd never seen any Australian my age doing it. And I saw this kid who was like literally had a cap and everything. I was like, wow, he's so cool. He's surrounded by all these older girls. Like, I want to do hip hop as well. So I started doing hip hop at UDC.
Right.
That's where I met Kieran and Geordie, and we started, yeah. And so I was like, yeah, taking classes, I guess, this kind of that whole period with Cisco and Rosa and Jet, and so that's like a whole other period. And then that led me to what I would call the most important part of my dance story as a teenager, which was with my crew, Too Much Bun. So I made that with Bodie,
Mm.
Geordie, and Kieran, which eventually became Instant Bun, which mixed with a bunch of your mates as well, because they're up north. So that, for anyone who's not familiar with it, was like a kind of parody breakdance crew. We would At the time I was obsessed with it, and it was kind of like my baby. It's all I cared about. I'd mix the music. I would doodle about it in my books at school. I would draw different logos for Too Much Fun. I would imagine costumes and what music will go into what music. And so that was basically from when I was maybe 14, 15 until I was 19. I think that took up that time. And we would make many performances a year. We would be at the carnivals and the competitions, and we would enter battles. Um, and this was a very important time for me, because we were so free, and I think I took it for granted. I didn't realize that it was we were doing something serious. It felt like it felt important to us, but I didn't believe that we were working as real professionals. But when I look back, like, we were very young. We were already making money and selling shows, organizing mixes, and we had a write up, and we were working professionally. But then at a moment, yeah, I felt this need to discover under other circumstances. Like, I wanted to be a real professional dancer, which I couldn't be. I felt, if I was focused on the crew. I think in retrospect that is wrong. I think I could have we could have just kept that going. We could have kept on exploring and creating inside of it. And we can come back to that. But basically, to keep on moving in my story, we I started working more as a dancer. So that's when I started meeting yourself, and we were working on X Factor and all these sorts of all these kinds of jobs. Um,
Mm.
so I was doing that, and I was teaching. Teaching was also another important element, because that's where I learned to choreograph as well. So it was like Matthew Godey and I teaching at the village, and we would have like 30
Mm.
kids in a class, maybe like 5 classes a day, and you're making up routines on these kids that you know and you love. So we were creating what we believe to be very artistically, but in this context of a like Australian dance competition, which is a pretty strange context to put your creativity. So we got used to kind of creating formations and picking the right song. That okay, so for example, I was teaching
Ah.
the hip hop routines. That was my job, was to make hip hop choreography for a bunch of kids for a competition. So I know that they're going to be up against other
Mm-hmm.
schools. They're going to do this song or that song. They'll probably wear this sort of clothes. Okay, then we'll do
Mm.
this instead because that will be a point of difference because it's a competition context. So Matthew and I were kind of
Mm.
obsessed with discussing what we're going to do next that can be shocking at an Eisteddfod or someplace that we're not really trying to shock. Like I don't, we thought we were changing the world, but it's just dance Eisteddfod, you know. But so we were taking that very seriously, and it was a big uh, uh, occasion for me to learn and to create my style of choreography, I think. So we're doing that, commercial dancing, and at the same time, I was creating kind of performance pieces, which I think is important to talk about if you want to discuss art in dance spaces, because I was kind of playing with that a long time ago.
Mm.
You were part of my first art show, Oingo Boingo. I don't know if you remember that. We made
Oh,
an art
yes, yes.
exhibition with like a yeah, we made a bunch of dance films that we put into reverse with like a sound design. It was like there was a whole concept around that, but that was really just us trying our luck at creating in a context that felt more universal, the art world, as opposed to creating just inside of the dance context. Um, so
Mm.
yeah, I was doing that, and that basically is when I moved to Paris. I'd say like I did So Think You Can Dance, and then yeah, we were doing the opera, and I was gonna go to art school. I was actually enrolled to COFA in Sydney, and at that same time, then instead I moved to Paris. So moved to Paris. First, when arriving in Paris, I didn't want to dance straight away as work because I saw it as this. I thought I would be here for maybe a year or two, and I watched a lot of European street dance. So I thought I would come to Paris and try to learn, make some friends, learn from their styles, kind of quickly build up level because I never did full time or anything. And I was like, okay, I have to kind of gather as many skills and make good choices about who I'm learning from because
Mm.
you kind of grab their taste immediately. So I met this guy Yanu Ninja, who's a Voga, and he was a funny guy,
Mm.
a very unique guy. So he started to teach me voguing, and I also was training with another guy who had a kind of French breakdancing style. So he taught me as well for a while when I first arrived here. And at the same time, I was just being a babysitter. So I had this kid that I was looking after, and I was just trying to learn French and practice dancing. So I was just dancing every day and living a kind of touristy French life. But then, yeah, so I was voguing a lot. Basically, voguing took over my training because
Mm.
it matched what I enjoyed, which is I'm not very flexible in the legs. I like moving my upper body, and I like the theatricality and dressing up, the aestheticism and the style. So I was like, yeah, let's go for voguing. I'm going to go into it. But at a moment, that also became a bit restricting to be able to just create inside of that. And again, it's just like entering into a new context, just like Sydney dance competition. It's the same thing, like because at the end of the day, there are a bunch of rules, and you have to create within those rules. So I know if I'm entering this ball, then I'm going to be against this voga, that voga, this voga. Therefore, they're going to dress like this. I'm going to, okay, I'll do this because I'll be against them. And so again, it kind of holds you into creating within a certain framework. And I always wanted to just create totally for anyone. So I kind of stopped voguing as well. I started
Mm.
mixing all of these influences uh, uh, to work. So my goal was like just work, get some interesting jobs because in Paris there's lots of cool stuff. I wanted to work in fashion or cinema, and there's like lots of interesting stuff. And I met a lot of models and dancers of different styles who had their own personality, and I was very impressed by the way that they could hold the screen or the attention just by themselves as a dance artist, which we're not really used to in Australia, where we grew up more to become a part of a group, you know, to exist, you know, as a backup dancer, which is also fun. I also really enjoy being a backup dancer. But I noticed in Paris, a lot of the work was about having your own style. You know, you had to be able to sell it yourself as if you were the star. Because that's necessary. If you're on a campaign
Mm.
for fashion or for perfume or something, then often they're looking for dancers, and you have to do beautiful stuff, but you have to have the confidence to look in the camera and understand the energy, you know. And so I was inspired a lot by that. Started kind of creating my own style, my own dance that I would, and my own methods of performing that as a soloist. So that was kind of the focus. And then I booked this show, the Jean Paul Gaultier Fashion Freak show. And that was the first time where I really
Mm.
had done a big show. Actually, like we'd done Carmen and stuff, but this is the first time like I was playing, I was the lead role, and I could kind of create the show how I wanted to. So it was a chance to actually be a soloist using my dance for the first time. Um, and that was very fun. After 8 months, I stopped that because it was still like 7 shows a week for 8 months. I was like tired of it at a moment. So then like joined the cabaret world, started started working in this cabaret that I loved when I first got to Paris. So originally when I got here,
Mhm.
um, I it was maybe a few months after we arrived. I went to this cabaret called the Manco Cabaret, and this place blew me away because it's basically like a series of shows, so maybe like 5 or 6 numbers, and then a little break for a DJ break where you can dance, and then again 5 numbers. But the numbers were so incredible, like it blew me away. I'm not going to describe anything, but maybe we can like put a link to some images or something from this cabaret. But it inspired me so much because I arrive and it's people of all ages, and everyone is dressed so beautifully and or extravagantly, and so like
Mhm.
the owners of the club grab us, put us in this booth, start like pouring champagne, and I was in this whirlwind of, oh, this is what I want to do. So anyway, I ended up just going there like every week just to party, because it was such a fun place to go and watch performances and still enjoy yourself without feeling like you had to compete between enjoying yourself and enjoying a show. You could do both at the same time. Blah blah blah. That was I ended up joining that cabaret, so I kind of continued on this exploration of harnessing my dance skills into characters that I could use on stage. So at that cabaret, I was doing like Billy Idol, and I was doing who's like an English rock guy. So I would do like a kind of rock and roll number. I would do playback, kind of working a bit like a drag queen, but I wasn't being a drag queen. I was just being myself, or like using my skills in order to perform.